Let's talk about Renata Glasc. Renata is the newest support coming to League of Legends, but she's not exactly a conventional enchanter. In fact, her unique blend of CC, very situational protection, and short-ranged aggressive tendencies has shaped her playstyle into something complex and interesting to explore. As usual, I got together with my community to test out Renata, analyzing as much about her place in the game as possible to form my initial insights. Remember that since I had limited time, it's not possible to have learned everything about Renata, so please treat this video as a primer instead of a definitive guide. In this video, we'll be covering Renata's abilities, skill order and combos, purpose and identity in a team comp, pick conditions, and rune and itemization forecasting. Renata's passive causes her to mark enemies that she auto-attacks. Application of the mark deals % max health magic damage, and the mark can be consumed by damage from Renata's allies to deal the % max health damage a second time. Renata can only have her mark on one target at a time, but there is no per target cooldown. Renata's Q is a single target hook that roots its target, allowing Renata to recast Q to throw them in any direction. The hook itself has a slow travel time and relatively short range. After the hook makes contact, but before Renata throws, she is slowed and cannot declare basic attacks, but she can still cast spells. The thrown target will deal the hook's damage to all enemies they pass through, and if the thrown target was a champion, those enemies are also stunned. Because of the versatility of the throw, Renata's Q can be used as a typical hook for engage, but it can also be uniquely used for peel or setup. Renata's W is a single target ramping steroid that can also situationally prevent death. W's buff grants movement speed while moving towards enemy champions as well as attack speed, with both doubling in strength over the duration of the buff. If the buff holder takes fatal damage while the buff is active, they do not die. Instead, they are reset to 100% HP and start burning to death over 3 seconds. If while in this zombie state, Renata's ally scores a takedown, they are revived at 35% HP and the burn ends, otherwise they will die. The most important property of this ability is that unlike other revives, there is no stasis period. The moment the buff holder takes fatal damage, they can continue dealing and receiving damage, so it is very likely that a squishy target can be focused down through Renata's W. While heals, shields, stasis, and invulnerability can stave off the burn temporarily, you are doomed while in zombie state unless you score a takedown. Renata's E is an area-targeted AoE skill shot that slows and damages enemies while shielding allies. The shape of this skill shot is abnormal. Effects apply first in an area around Renata, then along a linear path, then in an area around its target. No unit can be affected by Renata's E more than once per cast, so there's no point in trying to overlap these hitboxes. The slow is non-decaying and lasts for 2 seconds, while the shield lasts for 3 seconds. There's a lot of utility packed into this ability, but all of that utility is very easy to understand. Renata's ultimate is a long, slow cloud that inflicts enemies with Berserk, which is a new type of CC. Berserk grants 100% attack speed and causes units to attack anything nearby following a list of priorities. First, allied champions, then allied pets, then neutral units, then Renata's team, then Renata herself. This priority list creates some interesting interactions. Best case, Renata's ultimate causes the entire enemy team to fight each other. Worst case, used in a 1v1, you are literally buffing your opponent and causing them to hit you relentlessly. Berserk does affect all minions and pets, with a few known exceptions. Renata gains kill credit for anything a Berserk enemy slays, which includes objectives, though you should be aware that Berserk does not lock junglers out of casting Smite. I'm going back and forth on a few potential skill orders, which implies to me that this may be situational. It was immediately obvious to me that Q is a 1-point wonder. You get a decent amount of damage from skill points, but you only get damage and it's all single target, so I max this last invariably. But then despite testing both, I can't definitively decide between full E max and 2 to 3 points E into W max. As a support, it's critical that you don't invest your skill points fully into lane so your core teamfight ability is online in time. E's AoE damage and utility is critical for lane, so I know we need at least a few points invested, but W's uptime and steroid appear to make this that core teamfight ability. I'm predicting that we fully max E in games when we know we can only hold W for the revive rather than using its buff, but I need to play the champion more to identify what those situations are, if they exist at all. If you're looking for ways to chain your abilities together, there are only a few so far. The best and most obvious chain is using your slow to set up your Q. If you're just trying to run someone down, you do have the option to WEQ for movement speed. Q Flash is actually practical and is Renata's fastest pick tool. R Flash is possible, but I'm not sure how valuable this one is. One that's technically possible, but that I've yet to find a real use for is QR. This confirms Berserk onto at least one target, but then there are concerns of just hitting an isolated target who will start beating on your own team. Let's be very clear about Renata's strengths. Everything Renata can do that other champions can do, she does worse than them. Her hook range is limited, her hook speed is poor, her E range is poor, her shield is the worst of any enchanters, her wave clear is outclassed by her best in role, and her ultimate is slow and impractical as a primary engage tool. All of her cooldowns are very long and her mana costs are high. Renata is neither a pure hook champ nor a proper protective enchanter. Her identity is defined by the combination of abilities she has and her unique strengths that are not shared by other supports. Passive contributes shocking objective DPS for a support. Ultimate is a huge teamfight control tool that can fill the entire river. W prolonging a key carry's life can dramatically swing a fight even if that carry ends up dying. Renata doesn't specialize in engage or protection, but she does dramatically change how fights play out. Renata Glasc is a mid-game teamfight-oriented enchanter who leverages an aggressive early roam strategy into potent defensive objective control, putting significant pressure onto enemy auto-attackers as the game goes on. Renata is generally a weak laner. If she can find an early hook, then she can easily kill 2v2, but you won't often find raw E-poke or aggro hooks against stronger players due to their low speed and range. The saving grace of her lane phase is her easy shove with E, which opens opportunities to move mid or play with your jungler, where her kit does generate kills more easily. As soon as laning phase ends though, Renata's aggression must dramatically slow down. Trying to force plays at this stage will get you caught and killed since you're likely very squishy with slow tools. Renata's mid-game proactive plays are all about control, being where you need to be first, forcing the enemy to walk into your space, and playing for peel in anticipation of a fight-winning ultimate. Since Renata's ult improves as enemy carries get more items, she just gets scarier and scarier on objective fights, even if her own direct scaling isn't comparable to true late-game enchanters. Pick conditions matter a lot for a support, and so far from my games, Renata doesn't come off as a champion you can play every game. Keep in mind this claim is only backed by my limited experience. The reason I claim Renata doesn't feel like a strong insta-lock champion is because of the combination of poor solo playmaking and situational defensive tools. I want to emphasize how terrible she feels without a reliable frontline. If Renata has no one to create space for her, her strengths don't shine. So as far as I can tell, Renata's own team conf matters so much more than the enemy's specific champions. I think she's supposed to be picked late to lock your comp's identity into pure team fighting and to avoid high pressure lane matchups, but her ultimate alone is so good that I wouldn't be surprised if she ends up being a reasonable early pick. Of course, enemy auto attackers make Renata stronger, wind walls borderline invalidate her, and assassins make it hard to generate W revives, so the enemy comp does matter, but I strongly suspect she will always feel useful if she has a pure frontliner or a few bruisers. She is an oppressive front-to-back champion. Renata is a support, and on release, she will not be a viable solo laner. Her E just doesn't give her enough wave control to play an uninteractive lane phase, and she really can't trade without follow-up. However, the idea of solo lane Renata is very appealing. Renata only cares about XP because of her ultimate, which at rank 3 inflicts 2.25 seconds of very powerful CC. Support Renata will rarely reach level 16, but solo lane Renata might. Watch her closely in the patch notes. If they ever reduce E's cooldown too much, then Renata may be able to get away with being put in the mid lane. And if by the time she releases they still haven't killed off the roaming support top lane strategy, I suspect Renata will be very good at that. Renata's itemization boils down to a variant of standard enchanter itemization, which if you're not familiar looks like this in its simplified form. We have 4 core mythic options whose effectiveness varies based on our specific champion, the tier 1 legendary items with such situationally critical effects that they can be rushed before the mythic, the tier 2 items with generally excellent effects that are purchased when nothing above is more urgent, and the tier 3 items whose effects are usually deprioritized or greedy. This framework does mean that if neither Putrefier nor Mikhails are needed and I'm not in an exceptional circumstances that prioritizes Ardent Censor, I will always build Redemption. This is because as a support, we don't have the luxury of planning out a full build because we're never expected to have the income to fill our inventory, so we prioritize the items that give the most immediate impact. On enchanters, we generally value an item's effect significantly more than its stats. On Renata though, ability haste is abnormally valuable, which warps some of our decisions. Renata is rewarded by a greedy Staff of Flowing Water as it better enables her to cast an early W without sacrificing her revive, and lets her compensate for her low shield value by spamming E. Don't take this as an invitation to skip necessary Putrefier or Mikhails purchases. On the mythic front, Renata's long cooldowns heavily devalue Moonstone while her easy access to slows increases Mandate value. I believe Imperial Mandate is her core mythic with good situations for Locket and rare situations for Shurelya's. Moving over to the rune front, I believe this is Renata's best page for 2 simple reasons. Firstly, her Glacial synergy is outstanding offensively in the early game and defensively in the mid game, with the caveat that it makes it slightly harder for enemy melee carries to run into their team while Berserk. Secondly, because pairing Sorcery with this Glacial page optimizes A haste and partially compensates for her high mana costs. These are not her only options though. If you're facing a low range, low threat lane, Aerie can make Renata a very competent laner. And Guardian is an option if you need to tunnel into protecting your AD carry in lane, but I'm not convinced that on Renata, Guardian provides more safety than Glacial. We have a few minor runes in Resolve and Domination that look appealing. Feel free to experiment with these because I haven't tested them thoroughly, but I am confident in sticking with Inspiration Sorcery at least for the short term. So that's Renata Glasc, the Chem Baroness. This is the most excited I've been for a champion's release since Senna in 2019. I will be fully transparent with you, Riot has given me a new champion in my best role and class, which is great because it means I have a lot of experience and knowledge to draw on, but it also absolutely means I've been overthinking certain aspects about her. So I encourage you to push your limits. Play lane as aggressively as possible, look for crazy plays in the mid game, get experimental with your Renata drafts, feeds to learn what works and what doesn't, because I am confident in what I've learned, but Renata is just so different from the standard enchanter and it will take us time to develop her. Please report back with everything you discover about Renata, and I hope this video helped you prepare for when Renata takes over the Rift.